Isn't that dangerous though? Because it's almost like we're taking out of context the moment that Fanon is in, as you're talking about. It's a very tumultuous moment in the part of Africa is in. Before we even came on, Pascal mentioned that Fanon doesn't even really talk about sub-Saharan Africa.
Right.
He just talks about a few regions, and definitely doesn't really talk about the United States at all. So are people wrong then to use that kind of decolonial thinking in the U.S. context, for example, because that's still, here we are in 2024, and you still hear people talking about the internal colonies of the inner cities, which, oh God, what is his name? Donald Harris called out in the 70s. I think 73, he writes that really great paper that Adolf shared with us. Shout out to Adolf Reed, that we quote so much on this show. But is this kind of where that reading of Fanon goes wrong when we think about like the internal colony theory?
Yeah. So that's a really interesting point because I mean, one of the things that is again all too rarely mentioned about Fanon, and so he dies in 61, so he wasn't really around, for when Black Power stuff really got going, but he did say in Wretch of the Earth, this is not for you guys. And because he says, so colonialism involves a military and police, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. And that's like literally what he says, right? So the idea that a colony is in your mind, or, in my world, fucking insane things like decolonizing your syllabus, that has absolutely nothing to do with, Fanon. And he did say that. I mean, he knew that. He was specific about the things he was interested in, and he says, like at first there seemed to be some commonalities, but then we both realized, meaning both he's talking about New York and Chicago, we both realized that our situations are different. The situation in Africa, the situation in the United States is different. So yeah, if you don't have an army, you don't have a colony. He just says that, right? And he's one of the things I should just kind of add to that is there's a ton of stuff he writes about the turning of colonialism into a psychological phenomenon. And so he hates the idea that racism is unconscious, right? And he's constantly talking about this, that the colonizer wants it to be an unconscious thing. But in fact, what the colonization is all about is shoving it in your face all day long, your inferiority. It's not something under the table. It's not an unconscious bias. It's not microaggressions. It's fucking aggression. And it is meant to keep you in place all day long in 1,000 different ways. So it's a police state. And you were meant to feel inferior every moment of your life to keep you under wraps. So he thought the kind of psychologizing of it was completely bizarre, or just wrong.
Pascal?
Well, then again, it gets back to the larger question that we had today: is that why is this being revived at this particular moment to do such a disservice to the work of this man to highlight and support such bad politics?
Yeah, I mean, if I were generous, I would say maybe there's something dangerous in this stuff. In not in a kind of romantic sense, but in the sense that it gives the lie to the assumptions that we are laboring under, the neoliberal assumptions about how identity functions versus say class. That and it's in a sense. They have to. I'm almost tempted to say colonize, but you get the point, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to kind of find these folks, whether it's MLK or Rustin or Fanon, or Shirley Chisholm, or whatever it is that they're doing now, and tweak it to and really. So yeah, we were talking to some friends about American fiction, about even that. So that's like the novel's what 10 years old, 20 years old. How the script alters it. So this is a kind of presentism of right now. So it's like tweaking that even to make it say what we want it to say now. And as if the original is just like, it's this kind of material to be handled. It's a good question. Why it's the basic question of ideology, right? It's how does ideology function? That it kind of needs these things.
But to your point about American fiction, which we did a show on, I don't know if you saw that. Can you even read that book if you've seen the movie? Because the book's going to be a real shock to your system, because white people don't play the pivotal role that they play in the movie. And a lot of these films that are coming out, and what I call the last gasp of the Black PMC, is that as they've kind of ran through their George Floyd money, all these movies have kind of a main thesis, which is white people bad. Once we get over white people, then we'll get there, wherever there is supposed to be in these films. A book like Erasure by Percival Everett, one of the best books on kind of just everyday Black class life, and to take all of the class out of it with talented actors to a degree, but it served to your point, it served a mighty function when it comes to rehabilitating people on a meta level, like Issa Rae, who does come from privilege, like the character that she plays,
Right.
and gets to have something that the book character doesn't have. The book character is mentioned a couple of times in the first few chapters, and that's it.
Right.
And the name is different as well. The book was Wanda Mae Jenkins, right?
Right.
But she gets to have like a redemption arc, so we can understand where she's coming from when she writes this drivel. That becomes a movie that in real life won an Oscar, which is Precious.
Right.
And all the quotes that were getting put on by white people in that movie were actually said by Black people in real life. So does this charade need to be protected to protect job security?
I mean, that's not part of it. Yeah, I mean, there's more or less degrees of subtlety of ideology, right? And kind of pinning it down is, sometimes hard, because they're, they are subtle often. There's kind of like the really, really, really bad, obvious versions, and then there's a kind of slight tweaking of things to kind of inject it with your contemporary concerns. But as you're saying, right, there's an arc to all of it, and the arc is the same. And all of it is about displacing class onto something more primal, right, which is some kind of identity that is the original sin, right, some original sin argument. I mean, yeah, I mean, maybe we shouldn't be so. Maybe this isn't such a difficult thing. Maybe it is about money, and the money of because how does it possibly serve their interests to say that they're the ones actually, that is, the people creating this stuff are the ones generating the inequalities? It could just be as simple as that. That the people generating all this content have to replay this story over and over and over again, because otherwise, what the story is about them and what they're doing. I mean, this is like the humongous tragedy of something like Trump. I mean, there's multiple tragedies of Trump, but it's like that makes them seem like they're right because you've got a fucking racist. So then you can congratulate yourself endlessly on calling this out without any more examination. But the principle of the whole thing is, I think, is a kind of laziness of analysis, a cheap, easy, one-step analysis that apparently sells.
Pascal?
What's really tragic to me about this is that for a very small window of time, there was a politics that was working against these purveyors of this crude identity politics. that tried to work along class lines when Sanders was kind of new and fresh. And they were very effective in leveraging their narrative to crush that kind of brief moment of class politics. And it's what's saddening to me is that there was never an attempt to really realign the terms of engagement to put those people who were using those kind of arguments on their back. And when it came to them really trying to put a death knell in that Sanders politics, they did so pretty effectively.